I still remember that night as if it were yesterday. The night everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and marriage crumbled into ashes. 20 years, 20 long years of devotion, sacrifice, and blind trust, all destroyed in the span of a few minutes. My husband David had been distant for months. Late nights at the office, business trips that seemed to appear out of nowhere. His phone, once carelessly left on the table, now glued to his hand, guarded with passwords I didn't know. At first, I convinced myself it was just stress, just work, just the weight of providing for our family. I told myself, he's tired, he loves me, he'll come back to me. But deep down, there was a knot in my stomach, a whisper in the back of my mind that told me something wasn't right. Still, I ignored it, because I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe in the man I had built my entire life around. That night, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The table was set, candles lit, and soft music played in the background. I was trying, as I always did, to hold our family together. Then I heard the front door open, followed by the sound of laughter, a woman's laughter. My heart froze. My hands trembled as I wiped them on a towel and walked toward the hallway, and there he was, my husband, the man I had shared my bed, my heart, my soul with. His arm wrapped tightly around a younger woman, her perfume filling the house that still smelled of my cooking. "Darling," he said, his voice cold, detached, almost mocking. "This is Rachel. She's the woman I truly love. You should start packing your things." I stood there, staring at them, unable to breathe. His words hit me like daggers. My mind screamed, this can't be real. This has to be a nightmare. But it wasn't. Was my reality. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something at him, to beg him to remember the life we had built. But instead, I froze. My lips trembled, but no words came out. My knees threatened to give way, but I forced myself to stay standing. He wanted to see me collapse. He wanted to see me broken, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. Inside, I was dying. 20 years gone. The man I had trusted, the man I had believed in, had not only betrayed me, but had the audacity to bring his mistress into our home. My sanctuary, my children's safe place. But in that moment of devastation, a fire sparked inside me. If he thought I was weak, if he thought I would just walk away quietly, he was gravely mistaken. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears soaking my pillow, but alongside the sorrow, something else grew inside me. A plan, a hunger for justice, for revenge. I decided I would not confront him with anger. I would not scream or throw tantrums like he expected. No, I would play the role of the broken wife, the one too weak to fight back. I would let him believe he had one, because the more convinced he was of my weakness, the easier it would be to bring him down. So I smiled when he flaunted her. I cooked for them when they dined in my house. I listened quietly when he talked about his bright future with her. Every time he humiliated me, every time he dismissed me, I tucked the pain deep inside. And behind that smile, I was planning. Because I knew one thing. If I was going to lose 20 years of my life to betrayal, I was going to make sure he lost everything that mattered to him. But before I tell you how I did it, I want to know something from you. Where are you watching this from tonight? Drop it in the comments. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply that it burned a hole in your chest, yet lit a fire in your soul? Because if you have, you'll understand every single step I took next. And trust me, the best part of this story hasn't even begun. Asterisk, the days that followed felt like slow torture. Every morning, I woke up in a house that no longer felt like mine. I cooked breakfast for my children, packed their lunches, smiled for them, because I didn't want them to see my pain. And then I watched my husband leave for work. Sometimes with her already waiting in the car, it was humiliating. It was cruel, but I endured it. I let him believe that I was broken, that I was too weak to fight back. I became invisible in my own home, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Because invisible people hear things. Invisible people see things. And I was watching, listening, and memorizing every single mistake he made. At first, I didn't know where to start. How do you destroy a man who has stripped you of everything? But then I remembered I had been by his side for 20 years. I knew his habits, his routines, his business partners, his secrets. I had signed the documents, filed the receipts, balanced the accounts. I had been his silent partner in everything. And now, that knowledge would become my weapon. I started small. Late at night, when he was asleep, I unlocked his briefcase. I knew the combination by heart. His mother's birthday. Inside were contracts, invoices, business letters, I took photos of everything. Not a single document left my hands without being copied. Then I moved to his phone. He thought he was clever, locking it with a new code, but he forgot one thing. After 20 years, I knew his mind better than he knew himself. It took me only 2 nights of trying before I cracked it. And when I opened that phone, a floodgate burst. Messages to his mistress, messages to shady business partners, accounts hidden under other names. It was all there, and I copied it all. Every laugh I faked, every dinner I cooked, every tear I hid, all of it was fuel. Because each day I grew stronger. Each night I added another piece to my collection of evidence. And I didn't stop there. I started befriending people he had betrayed, old colleagues, former partners, even family members he had wronged. At first, they were hesitant, but when they saw the determination in my eyes, they opened up. They gave me stories, documents, proof, piece by piece. The puzzle came together. Still, I never let him suspect a thing. To him, I was still the broken wife, barely holding herself together. He would come home with her, laugh at the dinner table, talk about their future, and I would smile weakly, nodding as if I had accepted my fate. But inside, my rage burned hotter than ever. One night, I overheard him on the phone with Rachel, his mistress. His voice was low, but I caught every word. "She's pathetic. Just wait a little longer. She'll leave with nothing. Then you and I will have everything." Those words stabbed me, but they also gave me clarity. He wasn't just betraying me, he was plotting to erase me, to make me disappear as if I had never existed. And that's when my plan became clear. I wouldn't just leave him. I wouldn't just walk away. No, I would strip him of everything he loved, everything he valued, everything he thought was his dot. I started preparing my next move carefully. I met with a lawyer quietly, secretly. I showed him the documents, the messages, the evidence of affairs and fraud. His eyes widened as he flipped through the files. "This," he said, "is more than enough. You can take him down." Hearing those words sent a chill down my spine. For the first time in months, I felt power in my veins. Again. But I wasn't ready to strike just yet. Timing was everything. If I revealed my hand too soon, he might escape, twist the story, or hide his assets. I needed to wait until he was at his highest point, his most arrogant, his most untouchable. Only then would the fall destroy him completely. So I waited, patiently, carefully, pretending. And as I waited, I thought about the years I had wasted, the sacrifices I had made, the promotions I turned down to support him, the nights I stayed up caring for our children while he entertained clients, the dreams I buried so his dreams could flourish. All for what? For him to spit in my face and replace me with a younger woman? No, that wasn't going to be the end of my story. Because while he thought he was building a new life, I was building his destruction, and the day I unleashed it, he would never see it coming. The months passed, and with each passing day, David grew bolder. His arrogance filled every corner of the house like a poison I could no longer smell without feeling sick. He paraded Rachel around like a trophy, introducing her to friends, bringing her to family dinners, even attending public events with her on his arm while I, his wife, remained in the shadows. The whispers began, of course. People asked why I tolerated it, why I didn't throw him out, why I didn't fight. What they didn't understand was that silence can be louder than screams. My quiet obedience, my weak smile, all of it was part of the mask I wore. And behind that mask, I was sharpening my blade. David's business was thriving, or at least that's what he believed. Investors praised him, clients trusted him, and Rachel clung to him like a leech, drinking in the wealth and luxury he provided. He was planning a grand celebration for his company's 25th anniversary, a glittering gala with hundreds of guests, from politicians to business tycoons. That night, he said, would mark the beginning of his new life. His success, his love, his power, all displayed in front of the world. And I knew that night would also be his end. In the weeks leading up to the event, I prepared meticulously every document I had gathered, every photograph, every recording. I organized them into a devastating package. Proof of his affair, proof of his financial fraud, proof of his betrayal, not just to me, but to his investors and partners. I wasn't just going to expose him as a cheating husband. I was going to expose him as a liar, a thief, a fraud. But I needed allies. Quietly, I reached out to a few of his closest business partners, men he had cheated in deals, men who smiled at him publicly but cursed his name privately. When I showed them the evidence, their eyes darkened. They were eager to see him fall. And they promised me one thing. When the time came, they would not protect him. I also confided in one trusted journalist. She was known for exposing corruption, for tearing apart the rich and powerful with nothing but the truth. When I placed the evidence in her hands, she promised me headlines that would burn his empire to the ground. The night of the gala finally arrived. I remember standing in front of the mirror, carefully applying my makeup, slipping into a dress I hadn't worn in years. It wasn't for him, it was for me. For the woman who had been buried under years of sacrifice, humiliation, and betrayal. That night, I wasn't going to be the broken wife. I was going to be the storm dot. As I walked into the ballroom, heads turned. Some whispered, surprised to see me. Others smiled politely, unaware of the war brewing under the surface. David was at the center of it all, Rachel clinging to his arm like a shadow. He looked at me with smugness, as if I was a ghost of the past who hadn't yet learned to disappear. He stood on the stage, raising his glass to the crowd, his voice booming with pride. He thanked his partners, his family, his supportive wife. He even glanced at me mockingly when he said it. And then, as if twisting the knife deeper, he kissed Rachel on the cheek in front of everyone. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed. He basked in the glory, believing he was untouchable. But what he didn't know was that the very moment he raised his glass, my allies were already in motion. Documents were being distributed to investors. Journalists were preparing their stories, and whispers were spreading like wildfire across the ballroom. I stood there, calm, collected, watching the storm build, and when the murmurs grew louder, when faces turned from smiles to shock, when David's confident grin faltered for the first time, I stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice clear, carrying across the hall, "I think you all deserve to know the truth about the man you are celebrating tonight." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. David's face paled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Rachel's grip on his arm tightened. I held up the documents in my hand. "This man, who stands before you, is not the hero you believe he is. He is a liar, a thief, a fraud. And tonight, his mask comes off." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Journalists surged forward. Cameras flashed brighter. I handed the documents to the nearest reporter, who quickly began reading them aloud. David tried to speak, to laugh it off, to dismiss me as a bitter wife. But the evidence was undeniable. His emails, his hidden accounts, his secret deals, it was all there, in black and white. The investors began murmuring angrily. His partners turned away from him. His so-called friends distanced themselves, as if afraid his downfall might stain them too. Rachel, realizing her golden ticket had turned to dust, slipped away into the crowd, leaving him alone under the harsh light of exposure. And I stood there, watching the empire he had built collapse in a single night. For 20 years. He thought he held the power. He thought I was weak, disposable, nothing without him. But in that moment, as his world crumbled around him, he finally understood the truth. I wasn't nothing. I was everything he underestimated. And now, I was the one who had everything. The ballroom that night became his graveyard, not of stone and dirt, but of reputation and pride. I watched as the life drained from David's face. The confidence, the arrogance, the smugness, all of it replaced with fear. Fear of losing his company, fear of losing his wealth, fear of losing everything he thought made him untouchable. He stumbled from the stage, trying desperately to silence the journalists, to beg the investors, to convince someone, anyone, that this was all a mistake. But the evidence spoke louder than his lies. Phones were buzzing, lawyers were being called, the news was already spreading across the city. And me, I stood tall for the first time in years. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to me?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Do this to you? David, you brought another woman into our home. You humiliated me in front of our children. You planned to strip me of everything I had built with you. And now you're asking me how I could do this to you." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "No, David, tonight isn't about me destroying you. It's about you destroying yourself." I just made sure everyone saw it. Rachel was gone by then. She had slipped away quietly, her hands no longer clutching his arm, her smile no longer lighting up his shadow. She had found her exit the moment she realized his wealth was gone. She loved the money, not the man. And now, with nothing left, he stood alone. In the days that followed, everything unraveled quickly. The press devoured him, his investors pulled out, his company filed for bankruptcy. Investigations began into his fraud. His accounts were frozen, his reputation was stained beyond repair. Friends who once praised him refused to answer his calls. Even his own family distanced themselves, ashamed of what he had become. And me. I filed for divorce. With all the evidence in my favor, it was swift, clean, and final. I kept the house, I kept my share of the assets, and most importantly, I kept my dignity. He, on the other hand, was left with nothing but shame. One afternoon, weeks later, he showed up at the house that was now mine. He looked thinner, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He begged me, actually begged me, to forgive him, to take him back. I made a mistake, he said. I lost my way. But you and I, we can fix this. We can rebuild. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see the man I once loved. I saw a coward, a liar, a shell of a man who had thrown everything away. No, David, I said softly, but firmly. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now you're living with it. His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. I felt free, because in destroying him, I had found myself again. I closed the door on him that day, and with it, I closed the chapter of my life that had been filled with his betrayal and cruelty. I began a new one, a chapter where I was no longer a victim, no longer a silent wife in the shadows. I was a woman who had taken back her power, who had risen from the ashes of humiliation to build a life on her own terms. And every time I pass the mirror now, I don't see weakness. I don't see sorrow. I see strength. I see resilience. I see a woman who was underestimated, discarded, and betrayed, but who turned that pain into power. So to every woman out there who feels broken, who feels small, who feels invisible, remember this: silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. Sometimes it is the sharpest blade of all. And when the time is right, when the mask finally falls, the world will see exactly who you are. That night, when David lost everything, he looked into my eyes as if searching for mercy. But all he found was the reflection of his own destruction. Because in the end, revenge isn't about anger. It's about justice. And justice was mine.